I just played around 6-ish hours of the new groundbreaking season of Overwatch. And I'm going to try and give you my opinions on perks, loot boxes, and all the other changes that came with the season. Much like the other video I did for Honor, I'm going to be going over the good, the bad, and the ugly. So go grab yourself a brew. I've got mine here. And listen to me ramble about a game that I have the equivalent of an abusive relationship with. Hope you enjoy. But first, a few disclaimers. First of all, this was filmed within about 24 hours of the patch going live. I have no doubt that in 6 months or a year's time from now, you can look back on this video and be like, actually, that's not an issue anymore. But these are just my thoughts in the current moment. Secondly, this is just an opinion. You're more than likely to disagree with me on some of these points. That's what an opinion is, after all. If everyone just had the same opinion, the world would be a very boring and stale place. So feel free to let me know how wrong I am in the comments below. Engagement, yes. Also, I am a fairly casual Overwatch enjoyer. I occasionally dip my feet into competitive, but I don't really have the time for the game like I used to. I don't play this game for 300 hours a week, so my opinion is automatically invalidated. And finally, the biggest elephant in the biggest room, I am not a Marvel Rivals player. If you hear the negatives that I have to say, it is not because I am like, Marvel Rivals is better, yeah. Overwatch bad, Marvel Rivals good. Again, I don't really have time for that game, and it was a bit overwhelming for me with all these new heroes and whatever, so I never really cottoned on to it. These are genuine criticisms of Overwatch and not tainted by Marvel Rivals much. Anyway, on with the pros. I'm glad that Overwatch is finally growing a pair of balls. It is so good to see that they're finally adding some fundamental changes to the gameplay of Overwatch. I'm not being funny with you, but as someone who's played since launch, you kind of do the same thing over and over again. You go point, you use all your cooldowns, you don't get healed, the cycle continues. I'm glad they're not afraid to kind of change the concept of Overwatch. I mean, they're more being forced to change the concept of Overwatch, but anyway, because the formula has gotten stale over the 8 years that the game has been out, and that's bound to happen. The game's been out over 8 years. I look forward to more changes to the format. I feel like Overwatch needed some incentive to get through the game, if you know what I mean. With the perk system, it encourages you to keep on playing. Oh well, we got stomped in that round, or on that push. Oh, but let's go in again, I just got this perk, let's go. You know, that really increases the morale of the game. Because so often in Overwatch do I see, you lose your first team fight, and morale has just taken an absolute nosedive. In quick play and competitive. Especially in my ranks, where when we wipe, you bet your ass the Kiriko is going to start piping up. Another benefit of the perk system is the attempt to try and curb counter-swapping. As a primarily tank player, I sometimes play support. Counter-swapping is so fucking boring in this game. The perks are a good way at trying to restrict counter-swapping, because you lose them when you swap your hero. But in the case of both morale and counter-swapping, the perks just aren't quite enough. But I'll get into that later. Free stuff. Free stuff is good. I know that loot boxes are a meme inclusion, but being able to get content in the game that was previously 100% locked behind a paywall is nice. The fact that it shows you the pity timer for the loot boxes is also nice, despite it being a way to bow to the Chinese overlords. And there being events that give you a handful of loot boxes and the battle pass giving you a couple or whatever is nice. It's just bonus stuff, you know. There is more I want to say about loot boxes, but in terms of positive, that's all I've got for them. There's nothing new with this, but the art and design team just completely hard carry Overwatch. The skins that they make are still the best in their class, despite being recolors sometimes. And Overwatch's skins are still better than their competitor Marvel Rivals skins, despite some of them being interesting. This hasn't really changed this season, it's always been the case. I just thought I'd mention it. And finally, the promise of more to come is great. It's a good feeling. I'm excited for the Coliseum or whatever it's called, arena thing. Looks like a breath of fresh air, looks like a totally new game, to be honest. And hopefully this isn't just Overwatch dropping a huge amount of content, then going back into the shadows, not really doing anything. I hope they continue to make big changes, because the game needs it. Alright, enough glazing. Let's move into the negatives, and why I feel that Overwatch is far from back. I'm just gonna say it. I don't care that you broke your elbow. No, I'm gonna say it. The perks seem half-baked. Sure, there's a lot of perks in this update that are XD hilarious. Flats shaking the room screaming. But to be honest, the majority of them are boring. Oh wow, 2 less bullets per shot on Widow. Fast Unit gives me 300% temporary health. Sojourn has 15 more ammo. I don't really care how good these are competitively. I'm sure they've made a big difference competitively. But I'm not excited to pick them. I mean, I don't expect them all to be wacky shit like Torbs throwing his things on the roof or whatever. But there's gotta be some more exciting stuff than this. I'm not glazing Marvel Rivals here, but when you play a hero in that game, you feel broken with their kits and their abilities and the things that you can do on that hero. It seems unfair, but then everyone seems unfair, so that's what makes it kind of balanced, while still keeping it fun. The majority of perks aren't outrageous enough to simulate that, which kind of causes Overwatch to feel the same as before, but just every hero has a bit of a buff. This also means that counter swapping is still very much a thing. It's worth delaying your perks for a bit to be on a favourable hero in the matchup. The perks don't really change enough to risk losing them, especially on the first perks, you know, like, I know they're meant to be minor, but some of them really are minor. This is kind of exacerbated by the fact that there's only 2 options. For me, I feel like I'm picking the same perks every single time, because one of the 2 feels better in most cases. I'm a Zarya main. Yes, you can point and laugh at me. And while I see the benefit of increased mobility with her first perk, I'm rarely taking that over the massive 30% health to heroes during my ultimate. I know these will probably get balanced out over time. I feel like with 2 options, you're more than likely going to pick the same one over and over again. I know it's probably a lot of work, but by having 3 options per tier, it exponentially increases the variance of games. And you could do this in a cool way, like you could have 1 offensive, 1 defensive, and 1 utility talent. And then depending on your team or what you're going up against, you can choose your talents based on that. For example, if you've got a solid support line, you may feel like you want to go for an offensive one or a utility one maybe. Or if you know your supports are struggling against this team comp, you can pick a defensive one. I am aware that it's unfair to kind of demand more when they've already added quite a lot of new content, but the way that the perks have been implemented into the game makes me want more from the system, and it doesn't really change the game enough for me, a fan of Overwatch. How do you expect a Valorant player, a CSGO player, a Marvel Rivals player to drop the game that they're currently playing, that they've spent loads of time and maybe even money on, to swap over to Overwatch because they heard that Reaper's teleport can go 25% further? You know? If it feels like it's not enough for me, it's definitely not going to be enough to drag in new players. But maybe I'm just pessimistic, I don't know. Next point, why is the game still 5v5? I know this topic has been beaten like a dead horse, but everyone prefers 6v6. When they implemented the 6v6 quick play or whatever, the queues were basically instant. Everyone was playing 6v6, no one was playing 5v5. The argument that they said in their like big announcement video was that they're still trying to gather the data on the queues and stuff like that, but that is completely void by the fact that they're introducing a totally new game within the game with Stadium, or whatever it's called. The Stadium game mode, is it called Stadium? Yes, it is. The Stadium game mode is like a supplementary game to Overwatch. Some people will boot up Overwatch and only play the Stadium game mode. It's kind of like how in League of Legends you boot it up just to play Teamfight Tactics, or you boot up Hearthstone to play Battlegrounds. That kind of thing. If you're alright with splitting the queues up into Overwatch and Stadium, why is the queue concern for 6v6 such a big deal? I know 6v6 will come eventually, but I seriously don't know why it's taken so long. After there's been so much positive feedback about it. And no, not the min 1 max 3 one, no one cares about that. And my final issue with this season, the loot boxes are way too infrequent. Like I said earlier, I appreciate getting stuff for free for playing the game, but come on. When there's no events on, you get 3 loot boxes a week? That is insane. Especially since like the loot boxes are loaded with crap that no one cares about. Like, you'll see a purple shine come out of your loot box, and you'll be like, oh, what did I get this time? And it turns out to be a weapon charm or a souvenir. That is so lame.
So I didn't really need to do those last 2 games. These are shit, man. What the fuck?
This should not be capped at 3 loot boxes a week. Reward the players that spend an ungodly amount of time in your game. I understand that you don't want to add an infinite amount of loot boxes that you can grind every single week, because that eats into your revenue. It's a free-to-play game, fair enough. But is 5-10 loot boxes for putting in the grind every single week really too much to ask? It was like back in the day when you were giving people like 50 pence worth of Overwatch coins. Like, come on, give the people a bit more. With the worst possible luck, you can get 1 legendary in 20 boxes, and that's nearly 7 weeks worth of loot boxes. And to top that off, the legendary that you get isn't even guaranteed to be a shop legendary. It could be one that you could get from Overwatch 1. Like I said, I appreciate free stuff, but good god, is that stingy, man. Oh god. There's probably more that I can touch upon with Overwatch generally, but I kind of wanted to keep it all related to the changes that they made in Season 15. All in all, the changes that Season 15 implemented are not groundbreaking enough to change Overwatch. You boot it up and it's still Overwatch, warts and all. I want to be proven wrong in the future. The reason I made this video is because I do care about this game and I want it to succeed. But for me, this isn't enough. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my rambling. If you made it this far, do subscribe. It does mean a lot, and I'll catch you in a bit. Ta-ra.